You might see some pro players playing at resolutions like 1024 by 768 or 1280 by 960 and sometimes even 1440 by 1080p. Let's talk about why that is and if it's right for you. Quick disclaimer before we get started, your resolution will always be preference. I don't care if you're playing on 8 by 600 on a fucking Polaroid camera. Whatever you feel comfortable on, keep playing on that. Don't let me change that. All we're going to do today is talk about stretch resolutions, why people use them, and I'm going to help you make a decision. With that out of the way, let's hop into the game. So this is 1440 by 1080p. This is not the resolution I played Counter-Strike on, but it's very similar. I played on 1024 by 768. This is just upscaled, so it looks better, but it is still stretched. The initial reason for doing so, for cutting my resolution so much, is for performance. FPS always trumps quality when it comes to games like Counter-Strike and Valorant. You always want better performance over better graphics. This was a case for a lot of Counter-Strike players because the hardware that me and my friends played on back when we were playing Source and we were playing Go when it came out was not great. So we could not run the game at its native resolution of like 1920 by 1080 back when Counter-Strike Go came out, when we were playing in the beta. So I continued to play on 1024 by 768, even though we were in a completely new game. I was just used to seeing the game in a certain way, seeing it stretched out, seeing the character models stretched out. This is the case for a lot of people. If we could compare it to something else, when fighting game players sort of started to leave the arcades in the US because they were closing down, they started to buy fight sticks so they could continue to play on fight sticks at home. They had the arcade experience in their hands because that's just how they were used to playing the game. Now there's more intuitive controls. There's things like the hitbox, which is all buttons. There's things like the PS4 pad, which are a little bit more intuitive. Sticks continue to sell and players continue to play on them because that's what they're used to. That's how they're used to playing the game and seeing the game. However, we can't truly apply that to Valorant because if you've noticed, these character models are not stretched out at all. Actually, they're no different from 1920 by 1080p. And that's because the way that the resolution stretching and your FOV is different than in Counter-Strike. I can't change my FOV, so it doesn't appear like zoomed in how it did on CSGO because a lot of people felt like the game was almost zoomed in when you stretched it out so they could see enemies better. And the character models seemed wider. The hitboxes were not wider, but the character model itself seemed like it was fatter. It led to people feeling like they could hit shots better when they were playing stretched because the character model was wider and inherently easier to hit, but also easier to see. I felt like this was placebo for a long time until I tried playing 1920 on 1080p, and it felt significantly different because I'd been playing on the other one for so long, but I did notice that the character models looked a little bit skinnier. In Valorant, you probably noticed that the only thing that has truly changed is the HUD. The HUD gets stretched out, and your crosshair also gets stretched out a little bit, so it does look different, and I do like how the crosshair looks when it's stretched like this. One other thing in Counter-Strike is when you stretched your resolution, it felt like your horizontal sensitivity was a little faster whenever it was stretched than it is in like 1920 where it's perfectly squared off. So it did feel faster this way than vertically. In this game, I don't really feel it as much. To be completely honest with you, if you never played a stretch resolution in Counter-Strike or in Rainbow Six or any other game like that, there's not really a reason to do it in this one. It doesn't give you any advantage. It doesn't make the character models bigger. It really just stretches your HUD and your crosshair. I would say if you came to this video because you're maybe in a slump or you're not having the greatest games lately and you want to change your settings because you feel like it'll make you play better again, this isn't it. Like, that's not it completely. You should probably just take a break. Your resolution is not going to drastically change your gameplay. If anything, it's going to make it worse. You're going to have to build different muscle memory because the game's just going to look a tiny bit different. Little things are going to throw you off that didn't before because you're playing on just different settings. So I would say leave it. If you're comfortable with where you're at and you're just having a few bad games, leave it on what you've been playing on. For me personally, I'll probably play on this stretch resolution for a little while because it makes me feel like I'm playing Counter-Strike again and I really like the feel of it. But eventually you might see me back on 1920 just because it's what I've been playing on since this game came out. And if you don't believe me, then play on it. Play on a stretch resolution and play on your native resolution and you'll probably have similar results because Riot has done a pretty good job of making sure that stretch resolutions don't give you any semblance of an advantage. It didn't really give you an advantage in Counter-Strike, but they made sure that it didn't do anything in this game. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. This was a fun one to make. Seeing as I could never play Counter-Strike on something like this when I was younger, but to see the resolution that I played on as a kid, like upscaled to this level to like 1440 by 1080, is really cool. And it feels really nice to play on again. Like I said, eventually I'll probably end up back on 1920 at some point if I don't like this, but it feels right. Like, it just feels right to be on a stretch resolution again for me personally. If this helped you, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I'll talk to you again soon.